What if your 3-year-old child woke up one morning and calmly told you about the time they died in a car crash? What if they described a house they'd never seen, in a city they'd never visited, with details so accurate they could only come from someone who had actually lived there? This isn't the beginning of a horror story or the plot of a supernatural thriller. This is the reality that thousands of families around the world are quietly experiencing, and the medical community is finally starting to pay attention. At the University of Virginia, Dr. Jim Tucker has spent over 2 decades documenting cases that challenge everything we thought we knew about memory, consciousness, and the nature of human identity. His research into children who claim to remember previous lives has uncovered something far more disturbing than simple past life memories. These children aren't just remembering other lives, they're remembering parallel versions of their current lives, complete with different families, different homes, and different histories that exist nowhere in our reality. The case that changed everything began with a 4-year-old boy named Ryan from Oklahoma. Ryan started having nightmares about dying in a house fire, but the details he provided didn't match any fire in his town or anywhere his family had ever lived. He described a 2-story brick house with blue shutters, a specific arrangement of furniture, and even the names of neighbors who supposedly died with him. When his mother Linda researched these details online, she found something impossible. A house fire from 1963 in a town 3 states away that matched Ryan's description perfectly, down to the color of the shutters and the names of the victims. But Ryan had never been to that town. His family had no connection to the area, no relatives who had ever lived there, and no possible way he could have learned about this tragedy. More unsettling was what happened when Linda showed Ryan news footage of the actual fire. He became visibly upset and insisted the news was wrong. According to Ryan, his family had escaped the fire, not died in it. He remembered running to safety, remembered his parents surviving, remembered a completely different outcome to the same event. Dr. Tucker's investigation revealed that Ryan's memories weren't of the actual fire that occurred in 1963, but of an alternative version where the tragedy had a different ending. The boy was somehow accessing memories from a parallel timeline where he had lived through the same event with a different outcome. This pattern repeated in case after case, with children remembering historical events that almost happened, family members who almost existed, and lives that were almost lived. The phenomenon wasn't limited to traumatic events. 5-year-old Emma from Colorado began insisting that her grandmother had owned a yellow house with a wraparound porch. Her actual grandmother had lived in a small apartment her entire adult life and had never owned any property. But Emma's descriptions were so detailed and consistent that her mother decided to investigate. Through genealogical research, they discovered that Emma's great-grandmother had indeed planned to buy a yellow house with a wraparound porch in 1952, had even put down a deposit, but the sale had fallen through at the last minute due to financing issues. Emma wasn't remembering something that happened. She was remembering something that almost happened, as if she had access to memories from a timeline where the house purchase had been completed and she had visited her grandmother there countless times. When shown photographs of the actual house that had been for sale, Emma pointed out exactly where the swing set had been in the backyard and described the inside layout with startling accuracy, despite the fact that her family had never even seen the property. The medical explanation for these memories was initially attributed to cryptomnesia, the phenomenon where forgotten memories resurface and feel new. But as Dr. Tucker's research expanded, cryptomnesia couldn't account for the level of accuracy and the specific nature of the alternate details. These children weren't recalling repressed memories of things they had seen or heard. They were describing with perfect clarity events and places that existed only in theoretical alternative realities. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuroscientist studying consciousness at Johns Hopkins, proposed a revolutionary theory after reviewing Dr. Tucker's case files. She suggested that human consciousness might exist in a quantum state during early childhood, before the brain develops the filtering mechanisms that lock us into a single timeline. Young children, according to her research, might naturally have access to memories from parallel versions of their lives, gradually losing this ability as their neural pathways solidify around age 7. The timing was crucial. Almost all documented cases involve children between ages 3 and 6, with memories beginning to fade as the children approached their 7th birthday. This corresponded exactly with known developmental patterns in childhood amnesia, the normal process by which early memories become inaccessible. But instead of simply forgetting their own experiences, these children seemed to be forgetting experiences from alternative versions of their lives. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could access memories from parallel timelines during early development, it suggested that multiple versions of every person's life might exist simultaneously across different realities. The children weren't remembering past lives or imagining fantasy scenarios. They were remembering their own lives as they unfolded differently in alternate dimensions. Tommy, a 6-year-old from Michigan, provided the most compelling evidence for this theory. He insisted that his father worked as a firefighter and described in detail the fire station where his dad was supposedly stationed. Tommy's actual father was an accountant who had never shown any interest in firefighting. But when the family investigated Tommy's claims, they discovered that his father had actually applied to be a firefighter 15 years earlier, had passed all the tests, and had been offered a position at the exact station Tommy described. He had turned down the job at the last minute to pursue accounting instead. Tommy wasn't remembering his father's abandoned career path. He was remembering a timeline where his father had made the opposite choice. In that reality, Tommy had grown up visiting the fire station, had learned about fire safety equipment, and had experienced a completely different version of his childhood, with a father who risked his life to save others instead of managing financial records. The research revealed that these parallel memories often centered around pivotal decision points in family history. Children remembered versions of their lives where parents had chosen different careers, where families had moved to different cities, where major life decisions had gone the other way. It was as if consciousness maintained awareness of all possible outcomes, until the developing brain forced it to accept only one version of reality as true. But the most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Tucker began following up with families years after the initial interviews. The children who had reported parallel memories during early childhood often developed unusual abilities later in life. They showed heightened intuition about future events, uncanny accuracy in predicting the outcomes of uncertain situations, and an almost supernatural ability to sense when major life changes were approaching. It was as if their early access to alternative timelines had permanently altered their relationship with time and possibility. They retained a subconscious awareness that the future wasn't fixed, that every moment contained multiple potential outcomes, and that the reality they inhabited was just one of many possible versions of their lives. The question that haunted Dr. Tucker and his research team was whether these children were experiencing a neurological anomaly or revealing a fundamental truth about the nature of human consciousness. Were parallel memories a glitch in childhood development, or evidence that we all exist across multiple timelines simultaneously, with most of us losing awareness of our other lives as we mature? As more families came forward with similar experiences, and as the documentation grew more extensive and detailed, one possibility became impossible to ignore. These children might not be remembering fantasies or fragments of forgotten information. They might be remembering real experiences from real lives that they were actually living in parallel dimensions. If that was true, then every person walking the earth might have countless other versions of themselves living out different choices, different paths, different possibilities in realities that exist just beyond the reach of normal human perception. And perhaps in those first few years of life, before the barriers solidify and the filters engage, children retain the ability to remember who they are and who they might have been across the infinite spectrum of possibility that consciousness calls home. The evidence was mounting, the cases were multiplying, and the implications were becoming impossible to dismiss. Something extraordinary was happening in the minds of these children. Something that might reveal the deepest secrets about the nature of memory, identity, and the true structure of reality itself. The breakthrough came when Dr. Tucker's research team partnered with quantum physicists at MIT to investigate the neurological patterns in children who reported parallel memories. Brain scans revealed something unprecedented. These children showed unique neural activity in the posterior superior parietal cortex, the brain region responsible for spatial awareness and self-location. During episodes where they recalled alternate memories, their brain patterns resembled those of individuals experiencing lucid dreams, but with one crucial difference. The children were fully awake and responsive. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, lead researcher on the MIT team, discovered that these children's brains operated on multiple frequencies simultaneously. While normal consciousness processes information on a single dominant brainwave pattern, the children with parallel memories maintained access to what she termed quantum coherent states, neurological patterns that theoretically allowed consciousness to exist in multiple realities at once. The most compelling case in their study involved 7-year-old Marcus from Seattle, whose parallel memories were so detailed that they extended beyond personal experiences into knowledge he couldn't possibly possess. Marcus remembered living in a version of his life where his family had moved to Japan when he was 4. He spoke fragments of Japanese that he had never learned, described specific locations in Tokyo that matched real places, and demonstrated cultural knowledge that would take years of immersion to acquire. When Dr. Martinez's team verified Marcus's claims, they found that his father had indeed been offered a job transfer to Tokyo 3 years earlier. The family had seriously considered the move, had even researched schools and neighborhoods, but ultimately decided to remain in Seattle. Marcus wasn't imagining a life in Japan. He was remembering a timeline where his family had made the opposite choice. The neurological implications were staggering. If consciousness could maintain awareness across multiple timeline branches, it suggested that the human brain might function as a quantum processing device, constantly calculating and experiencing all possible outcomes simultaneously. The filtering that occurred around age 7 wasn't just childhood amnesia. It was the brain's way of locking consciousness into a single timeline to maintain psychological stability. But some children never fully developed this filtering mechanism. Dr. Tucker documented 43 cases of children who retained partial access to parallel memories well into adolescence. These individuals often struggled with identity issues, reported persistent feelings that they were living the wrong life, and displayed an uncanny ability to predict outcomes because they remembered experiencing similar situations in alternative timelines. Jennifer Walsh, now 16, had been one of Dr. Tucker's earliest cases. At age 4, she had insisted that her sister died in a car accident, despite having no sister in her current reality. Her parents had considered therapy until Jennifer provided details about the accident that matched a real collision from their hometown. A collision that had been narrowly avoided when another family decided to leave for vacation an hour later than planned. As Jennifer grew older, her parallel memories didn't fade like those of other children. Instead, they evolved into what she described as probability awareness. She could sense when major events were approaching by remembering variations of them from alternative timelines. She had warned her family about 3 different potential accidents, helping them avoid dangerous situations by recognizing patterns from her other lives. The psychological impact on these families was profound. Parents struggled with the implications of their children's memories, wondering if they had made the wrong choices, if better versions of their lives existed in parallel realities just out of reach. The children themselves often experienced a deep sadness for lives they remembered living but could no longer access, mourning family members who existed in other dimensions but not in their current reality. Dr. Tucker's research revealed that parallel memories weren't random. They consistently centered around pivotal decision points, moments when a choice could have radically altered the course of a life. This suggested that consciousness might naturally maintain awareness of all possible outcomes until external forces or internal development required it to commit to a single timeline. The quantum physics team proposed a revolutionary model. Consciousness might exist as a probability wave that collapsed into a specific reality only when observed or measured. Children, with their developing neural networks and flexible brain structures, could potentially maintain quantum superposition longer than adults, allowing them to remember multiple versions of their lives simultaneously. This theory gained unexpected support from the growing research into the Mandela effect. Adults who reported false memories of historical events, brand names, or cultural details showed similar neural patterns to the children with parallel memories. The difference was that adults had lost the ability to consciously access these alternative realities, retaining only fragments of memory from timelines that had been overwritten or abandoned. The connection suggested that parallel memories weren't a childhood anomaly, but a fundamental aspect of consciousness that most people lose access to through neurological development. The children weren't experiencing something abnormal. They were demonstrating the natural state of consciousness before it became constrained by the limitations of a single timeline. Dr. Martinez's team conducted follow-up studies with adults who had reported Mandela effects using the same brain imaging technology they had developed for the children. The results were remarkable. Under specific conditions, including meditation, sensory deprivation, and REM sleep, adult brains could temporarily reactivate the quantum coherence states observed in children with parallel memories. During these states, adult subjects reported brief flashes of alternative memories, glimpses of lives they might have lived, decisions they might have made, realities they might have inhabited. The memories were fragmentary and fleeting, but they contained verifiable details that the subjects couldn't have known through normal means. The implications extended far beyond individual psychology into fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. If consciousness could access multiple timelines, if memories could exist across parallel dimensions, then the concept of a single fixed reality became untenable. Every moment might contain infinite possibilities, with consciousness navigating between them in ways that science was only beginning to understand. The research faced significant resistance from traditional academic institutions, but the evidence continued to accumulate. Families from around the world contacted Dr. Tucker's team with similar experiences. Support groups formed online, connecting parents whose children remembered lives from other timelines. The phenomenon was becoming too widespread and too well documented to dismiss. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery was that the frequency of parallel memory cases had increased dramatically since 2012. Either awareness of the phenomenon was growing, or something fundamental was changing about the relationship between consciousness and reality. Some researchers theorized that global events, technological advances, or even cosmic phenomena might be weakening the barriers between timelines, allowing more children to retain memories from parallel lives. As Dr. Tucker compiled his findings into what would become the most comprehensive study of consciousness and parallel realities ever conducted, one question remained unanswered. Were these children revealing something new about human consciousness, or were they demonstrating abilities that all humans once possessed but had gradually lost? The answer might determine not just our understanding of memory and identity, but our entire concept of what it means to be human. If consciousness could exist across multiple realities simultaneously, if every choice created a new timeline that continued to unfold in parallel dimensions, then the nature of existence was far more complex and extraordinary than anyone had imagined. The children who remembered parallel lives weren't experiencing delusions or fantasy memories. They were providing glimpses into the true structure of consciousness and reality, showing us that the life we think we're living might be just one note in an infinite symphony of possibilities that extends across dimensions we can barely comprehend. The research was ongoing, the cases were mounting, and the implications were becoming impossible to ignore. We might all be living multiple lives simultaneously, with most of us aware of only one thread in a vast tapestry of parallel existence. The children were simply the ones who hadn't yet forgotten how to see the whole picture, and maybe, if we learned to listen to them, they could teach us how to remember who we really are across all the infinite versions of ourselves that exist beyond the boundaries of a single reality. The universe might be far stranger, far more wonderful, and far more personal than we ever dared to imagine.